let's dive into the combine winners and losers for the quarterback and the wide receiver position. We got nothing from Caleb Williams, not even medicals. I think you could make the argument though that maybe like Caleb Williams kind of wins because he's like, I'm not even giving you my medicals, and it's probably smart. Only one team's going to draft you. It's going to be the team in number 1 overall. You don't need to give your medicals to 31 other teams. Interesting approach. Marvin Harrison, of course, didn't do anything and no showed his presser, was apparently, according to Chris Carter, in some sort of MRI situation. I don't know. Drake May, Jaden Daniels did not throw. Josh, give me a winner from the wide receiver group.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I will say you're right about Caleb Williams. I think he probably was a winner considering the narrative around him coming into the week, the fact that most kind of thought he was a little bit self-absorbed, a little emotional based on how he reacted post-game this year. I think he was a big winner because he was able to show his personality and handle some of those questions that were asked of him this year. But from the wide receiver position, I thought Florida's Ricky Pearsall did really well, looked really crisp in the drills. I thought that he was going to run slower than he did in the 40-yard dash, ended up running in the 4.4. So really consistent player that checked that box for me. I thought he did fantastic. Xavier Worthy, that was the talk of everybody on Saturday, is how fast he ran, of course, setting the combine record with a 4.21 second 40-yard dash, breaking the previous record set by John Ross in 2017. Now the question is, how high is he going to go?
Yeah.
Because John Ross went number 9 overall to Breach's Bengals. Xavier Worthy
one spot ahead of who was he taking one spot ahead of? Who was it?
Subject, Princeton. We don't talk about anymore.
Who went 10th in that draft? Who went 10th in that draft? Was it Patrick Mahomes?
His name rhymes with Brat Mahomes.
Yeah. But look, by the way, John Ross, I thought was a really good prospect. He just injuries derailed his career. But what's interesting, Josh, I think, is with Xavier Worthy breaking that record. Like, is he a first round? Do we think he's a first round prospect because of that? Like, he's now.
I think he's still a fringe first round prospect. I thought the tape was pretty good. So he was in that conversation previously. The fact that he is tested as well as he did certainly helps that. But at the same time, I think everybody could tell that he was fast on tape. So it's like, how much does that really shape your opinion?
Right.
He's definitely going to get boosted up a little bit. I would be taking the, I guess, the under as far as where he's projected to be drafted right now. But I don't know if it shapes where his projection is, too much.
Yeah, I think we get real caught up in the speed of, I think Matt Waldman, who does a great job with his rookie scouting portfolio, called speed. The 40-yard dash is the cleavage of the of draft season, because you're drawn in, you're enticed by the 40-yard dash, and ultimately, like, it doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of pushback on #draft Twitter. I don't know if you saw this or not, Josh, but Breach, I'm sure you did, just being at home and watching it, where people were firing up lists of guys who ran like a 40-yard dash, because the thing with Worthy is he's only 5'11", 165. Like that is rail thin. And so it's great that he's fast, but the list of guys who have had, I think it's 1,000 yards. There's like one guy out of like 40 guys who ran a sub 4.40, weighed less than 175 or something, or maybe way less than 200. I can't remember what the exact number was, but I mean, like, that's definitely a concern when you start talking about this guy. Even though I agree completely, he's a winner. He broke the combine record for the 40-yard dash, and it was an explosive moment, awesome moment. But I do think you have to worry about that a little bit, Breach.
Yeah, and to your point, Brinson, as I can personally attest to with the John Ross draft pick, is that these receivers who come away with these blazing fast 40s, it does look sexy. And I do think it does help their draft stock, obviously. And I mean, there was literally a full decade where the running joke was whoever ran the fastest 40 at the combine was going to get drafted by the Raiders. We saw them take Jacoby Ford and Darius Hayward-Bay, and even, oh my gosh, Henry Ruggs ran a blazing fast 40. So you had just all these guys who are running under 4.3, but the fact of the matter is that rarely does this translate to success on the field. And as Josh has mentioned, Worthy's probably a first-round prospect, and so not a bunch of these guys that run 4.3 and under are getting drafted in the first round. There's Ruggs and Hayward-Bay, as we just mentioned. There's John Ross, and I think Dante Stallworth back in 2002. Those are your four guys who ran 4.28 or faster and got drafted in the first round. So it's not a huge subset of people, but man, it's stacked against you. The odds are stacked against you because guys rarely have found success when they end up running this fast at the combine.
And so Scott Barrett DFB on Twitter, really good follow. But he posted a list of top wide receivers. By the way, he also posted, this is the fastest wide receiver group in combine history. Average 4.44. That is wild how fast that is. But he did a speed score, which is a weight adjusted 40 time. And I mean, I realize like it's like, 40 is the 40, but it's like, if you're running a 40 at like 235 pounds, it's obviously, it's more impressive than doing it at 165. And the speed score puts Xavier Worthy at 9 versus Xavier Leggett at number 1. And then Brian Thomas and Adonai, is it Adonai?
Yeah, you can just call him AD too. That works.
And AD Mitchell at 2 and 3, both guys who are also winners in your book, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to look at Texas for one of the other winners in this draft class because AD Mitchell was one of them. He measured about 40 pounds heavier than his teammate, but ran a 4.3. What was it? 4.34?
4.43 for him.
I thought it was a little bit lower than that. But
Brian Thomas 4.33, Mitchell 4.43. I think is what Harry wrote down. I'll
but he jumped out of the gym as well, so it wasn't just like he ran fast. He showed those explosive traits in the vertical and the broad jumps as well. Just a really fantastic showing. When you look at his size, 6'2", 205 pounds, he looks a lot more like one of those X wide receivers in today's NFL. So that's going to translate pretty easily to the next level. You look at Brian Thomas Jr., just an incredible athlete, of course, running very fast in his own right. 4.33 in the 40-yard dash.
Hey, by the way, I don't know if you saw what Harry posted, but 4.34, you were right. And Harry, don't worry about it. You're doing 50 million 40 times. It's easy to get those flip-flop. But yeah, 4.34 for Adonai Mitchell, the third fastest time overall behind Brian Thomas and Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of thought that was the case because of how noteworthy it was. To have that much of a weight difference over your teammate and still run, a little less than a tenth of a second slower is fantastic. But Brian Thomas Jr., just a guy that's going to be able to win downfield in contested catch situations, somebody that I still think has his best football ahead of him. He's going to be a first-round pick all day, and he's one of the guys that really helped himself in this draft class, which, there's a ton of them. There's like 10 of them that could go in the first round at this point. And that's why it's not necessarily so easy to just automatically say Xavier Worthy is a first round pick.
Right. Exactly. It's like who's at the back end of the first round? What's their preference in terms of what they like to draft? Does he fit the analytics stuff for that team, et cetera? Like, is it, Chiefs are picking 32. Do they trade out? I mean, they certainly need wide receiver help, but Andy Reid hasn't really spent a ton of first round picks on wide receivers. I think, Jeremy Maclin might be he didn't draft Dwayne Bowe, so Jeremy Maclin might be the only one. Then he reads every because Deshaun Jackson was a second round pick. I have to look that up. But anywho, quarterbacks breach. Were you impressed by the quarterbacks who were out there? JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix, notable winners on Josh's list.
You know what I would say is that I was a little worried about JJ McCarthy there at the beginning because I would say the quarterbacks are the people I watched the most.
He doesn't appear to be an ambi thrower.
Yeah, it was like, oh my God, this is not how you want to start. But he ended up throwing pretty well. I would say Michael Penix Jr. I'm glad he is on your list, Josh, because he was probably his throwing style is just so unique in the sense that everything he throws is a dart. And when people throw like that, you worry about their accuracy, but he went out there and looked fantastic. He's one of those people that I'm not sure where teams would have had him on the board before the combine, but now that you're getting, now that you get that up close look, and again, they'll get it at his pro day, but I think he becomes a surefire first round pick instead of maybe on the fringe of being a first round pick.
Man, I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I think that like it's worth reiterating. By the way, he started, do you know how many pass attempts Michael Penix Jr. had in college?
4.2 million, somewhere in there.
1,685. That is wild. That dude was in college he played 6 years of college football. And a lot of these guys hit, with the COVID stuff. So he is older and he's got a injury history. I'll be curious to see how those medicals shake out. We talked about that before the combine. I think you're probably right. I think he's probably a first rounder breach, but it's also like, how many times did you hear the phrase, this guy's a top 10, this guy's a top 15, like this guy's a first rounder? It's like there's only 32 picks in the first round. I'll just be curious to see. And again, it comes down to what do teams need, who's on the back end. Do teams want to trade back into the first round to get that 5th-year option? Is it a team like Seattle that loves to trade down and, could be looking to maybe get somebody to come in behind Geno Smith eventually? I'm not sure the problem with Penix is like, can he be a guy that a team without a starter drafts and it's like, oh, we'll just let him sit for a year or two? He's like all of a sudden 27. I mean, it's a tricky situation, but he threw the ball really well. I mean, just against air, obviously, but a great thrower of the football.
Yeah, I had to write the article, winners and losers from the quarterback position for CBSSports.com. To be honest with you, I didn't think that anybody really shaped the narrative for better or worse too much this year. I thought Michael Penix did what he needed to do. I thought JJ McCarthy did what he needed to do, but I don't know that anybody necessarily really hurt or, helped their draft stock this year.
Some of the McCarthy stuff, like just irrespective of how he performed, like you hear, there was a report, somebody said JJ McCarthy's in play at number 2. And that's crazy. Like, I mean, JJ McCarthy won a national title. Don't get me wrong. Drake May won 8 games at Carolina with a ton of talent around him. And I have questions about Drake May, but I mean, if you're picking between JJ McCarthy and Drake May, give me Drake May all day.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the discussion here, because now that we're JJ McCarthy as a possible top 10 pick, if you have 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10 and you're still seeing the Broncos, the Raiders, the Vikings, teams like that in the middle part of the first round, there's going to be a lot of teams that need a quarterback. So if 4 go in the top 10,
Michael Penix is probably a first rounder, right?
Yeah. And the same conversation with Bo Nix from Oregon does this create a little bit of more urgency in the middle part of that first round where you could see a 5th or a 6th quarterback taken there? Or does somebody trade back up into the bottom of the first round to get that player? A year ago, we were having a similar conversation once Will Levis started to slide down the board a little bit. We later found out that the Titans did try to trade into the bottom of the first round to take Levis, but he didn't end up being taken until the top of the second round. So to your point earlier, we always act like there's certainly going to be 5 quarterbacks or 4 quarterbacks in the first round. But the reality is, some of these guys tend to slide a little bit.
Yeah, I think we can see like the number in Vegas open up at 4.5, and then suddenly the under becomes like heavily like minus 250 when it starts to seem like somebody could slip out. But yeah, I mean, it feels, and then like you've also heard JJ McCarthy's above Jaden Daniels. And that's stuff that's coming out of the combine. And I think it's important to remember that with the combine, a lot of times, media. So I mean, it's just a reality. Media and fans. So the media is playing catch up to a degree to these teams and these scouting departments who have been doing all this stuff. And, the media has mostly been covering the NFL season. And now it's like, oh, and like, dude, like these head coaches are playing catch up too. Like they're diving into it with their scouting department. That's what they're doing as a full-time job right now. It's just fascinating because it's not as simple as like, all right, like, yeah, this is set in stone. This is where it's all shifting right now.
There's also teams that want their own narrative out there because it could help that certain player land with their team. They may try to push a negative narrative about a player in the hopes that player falls. So you do have to take what you hear with a little bit of a grain of salt. Absolutely. Because everybody has their own agenda in this process. You're hearing stuff from agents. They've got their own agenda. They want their player to go higher so they get more money. You see teams where they put stuff out there that, is on the negative side because they want a player to fall. It's this give and take during the draft cycle that, I do think you have to have your antenna up a little bit as you hear some of this stuff come out at the combine.